So when Samvarana is reaching here, somebody need to receive them. Some Ikshvakus received the Samvarana. And that is why we say this migration of the Western Ikshvakus happened earlier than early Rigveda. And so they were there and ready for this kind of an alliance. And as an alliance, the Kuru lineage formed, and then the Kurus in a later period migrated again, returned back to the Vara Prithivya and renamed it as Kurukshetra, and the southern part as Kurujangala. So all these things we have seen. So after this migration up to here, the migration of the Western Ikshvakus, like the migration of Manu migration, or the migration of Manu people from the ocean to the Vara Prithivya or the Haryana happened in the pre-Rigvedic period, and the Western Ikshvaku migration from ancestral Sarayu to the Haro River or Sarayu River happened before the early Rigveda. But from here onwards, it got captured into the Rigveda. That is migration of Samvarana Bharata. It got more or less captured into the Rigveda in bits and pieces, but more of it is in the Mahabharata. It got captured, where it says Samvarana got defeated by the Panchalas, and he fled to Sindhu and lived there. And there is mentioned lived there for 1,000 years, which is a poetic way to say that they settled. They didn't come back for more than 1,000, around 1 millennium. They stayed here. That is the meaning. So that happened here. That is again that got recorded both in Rigveda and the Mahabharata. And then the Dacharajina battle. This is part of the migration of Samvarana is part of the Dacharajina battle. It is one of the steps in the migration of Samvarana. Failure of failure in Dacharajina battle made him move further westward and settlement in the Sindhu Sarayu region. And then the alliance everything formed. And after that, there was a Varshagira battle along against Simyus, located close to the Sindhu River. And then there was a battle of Sarayu. These all got recorded in the Rigveda. That's what I'm saying. All these battles got recorded in the Rigveda. This happened in the middle Rigvedic period. These two battles. These things happened in the early Rigvedic period. This was pre-Rigvedic. This is early Rigvedic. Varshagira battle and battle of Sarayu occurred in the middle Rigvedic period. And then, of course, the migration of the Kushikas. This is, of course, it's the number is 6, but it is actually happened in the early Rigvedic. Somewhere after the Vishwamitra's, Vishwamitra crossed Vipas, Sududri, etc. And during the period, Vasishta was the priest of Sudas. Vishwamitra started having his own expedition to the eastern direction. And first he conquered Kikada, and then slowly settled in Ganga. Renamed, so Ganga is now named as Jannavi, to honor the ancestor of Vishwamitra, Jannu. So there was a migration of the Kushikas. Kushikas migrated as far as later. I mean, throughout the Rigvedic period and during the Rama era, they were in further far east into the Bihar with the names like Kaushiki River in Bihar. So the Kushika migration ended in Kaushiki River. That is why the Bihar, that river is called Koshi River. That is called Kaushiki, because that is the easternmost terminal point of the migration of the Kushikas. And this information is recorded in Ramayana. And then, of course, the eastern Ikshvaku migration that has happened somewhere in the middle to late Rigvedic period. And by the time of 10th Mandala, Sri Rama is already in Ayodhya. So by the 10th Mandala, these eastern Ikshvakus reached Ayodhya. So almost the middle of Uttar Pradesh. So that migration is already. So this migration is not recorded in Rigveda, but we are inferring it because of two data points. One is Rama mentioned in the 10th Mandala, and second, the Ramayana mentioned Rama as living in the Sarayu River of Uttar Pradesh, in the Ayodhya city of Uttar Pradesh. So corroborating this information, we can say that by around end of the 10th Mandala, that is by the end of the Rigvedic period, during the reign of the contemporary to the reign of Rama and Shantanu, the Ikshvakus reached as far as Ayodhya city. That is the middle of Uttar Pradesh. And of course, shrinkage of Tritsus, I have mentioned about it. Like by the time the Kurus returned to the migration of Kurus, the Kurus migrated and returned back. As I mentioned, right after the marriage of Samvarana and Tavati Vaivaswati, around 1,000 years elapsed, and there was a descendant of Samvarana named Kuru, who returned back to Vara Prithivya and named it as Kurukshetra. He was able to do that because that time the the enemy tribe, the Trutsus, they become very small, weaker, etc. They had, after Sudas, there were two kings who were famous, like Sahadeva and Somaga, who took part in this battle of Varshagira battle and this battle of Sareva, where they were victorious. But after Sahadeva and Somaga, there was no great king. And because of that, these in the people of Varaprithivya, the dominant power of Varaprithivya, the Trutsus become weaker and they shifted to Kurujangala, that is to the south of Kurukshetra. And then we started seeing the names like Anjasi, Kulasi, Virapatni, Shifa, that is a Delhi river, Sahibi. So those names started appearing in Ṛgveda. So that means by that time, the enemies of the Samvarana Bharatas or the Kurus completely declined. There was one more migration I could not list. There was a, like, whenever they declined, there are two. One reason is the Anavas, before the coming of Kurus, the Anavas also came to the Varaprithivya and ruled it for some period of time. And that is mentioned in the Puranas as the Asuras conquering Devaloka and the Asuras dominating the Devaloka. Because, of course, we know that the Anavas are mapped as Asuras in the Puranas, and or as Danavas and Daityas. So whenever the Anava group came and dominated the Varaprithivya, the entire that political dominance of the Trutsus ended, and they migrated, they shifted or shrunk to the south of the Varaprithivya and started living along Drishadvadi and Sahibi river. And that is why the names like Anjasi, Kulasi. Anjasi is the Yavyavati or the channel of Yamuna. Kulasi is Drishadvadi and Virapatni is Saraswati. And Shifa is Sahibi river. So that southern part of Kurukshetra, that become their homeland. And this situation is also recorded in the Ramayana as Panchalas living in Kurujangala. That this is like Ramayana, this is a cross correlation with the Ramayana, that Panchalas were living in Kurujangala. That information you get from Ayodhya Kanda of Ramayana. And of course, this is also another important data point signifying that Sri Rama is later to King Kuru, because it is King Kuru who renamed Kurujangala, the Kurukshetra and Kurujangala. And because of that, the term Kurujangala appearing in Ramayana contemporary to Sri Rama and Bharata, Sri Rama's brother Bharata, etc. That signifies Rama is later to King Kuru. So all these things are recorded in Ramayana. So the cross correlation. So after the migration of Kuru, the last thing happened is the migration of Shantanu. So there was a migration happened during the period of not only Shantanu, but this Pradipa and Shantanu. Pradipa is somewhat in the fourth generation of Kuru, or fourth or fifth generation of Kuru. So that time, the Kuru is primarily in the Kurukshetra, right? Kuru ruled in Kurukshetra, and there was cities like Asandi, which is the capital, can be considered as a capital of Kuru, who ruled in Kurukshetra. But their descendants slowly started migrating for a better river, and they reached this Ganga river. And that is what mentioned in the Mahabharata, that Shantanu marrying Ganga. So that is a kind of a geopolitical statement. Even though we look in literature, we see the Shantanu marrying a river Ganga, but nobody can marry a river. That is only in poetry. So what happened? The King Shantanu became the Pati. Pati means the owner or ruler. Pati of Ganga. Just like we know that earlier when Kushikas migrated to Ganga, Vishwamitra made a new terminology that Ganga is Jannavi. They were in, he renamed Ganga based as with the name of his ancestor Jannu. So Ganga became Jannavi when Kushikas were dominating in Ganga. Ganga became Bhagirathi. Ganga became Bhagirathi when Ikshvakus dominated Ganga. Bhagirath became dominant in Ganga. So after Kushikas, the Ikshvaku become dominant power in Ganga. As part of the eastern migration, Ikshvakus reached Ganga, and during the period of Bhagiratha, and that time the river is renamed as Bhagirathi. Now it is a time of the Kurus. After Kushikas and after the eastern Ikshvakus, Kurus are even somewhere around the 10th mandala, like the Kurus migrated to Ganga, and they dominated Ganga, and that is the time when Ganga is mentioned as wife of Shantanu. It is similar terminology. Just like Jannavi, just like Bhagirathi, Ganga is mentioned as wife of Shantanu. So That is a last migration of Shantanu. Again, this is not recorded in Rigveda, but we are inferring it based on the information in Mahabharata, where it says Shantanu married Ganga. Of course, even Pradipa was proposed to Ganga. Because if you read Mahabharata very closely, there is an instance of Ganga coming to Pradipa, that is father of Shantanu, and she herself proposes to Pradipa, please marry me. Then Pradipa says, no, I don't marry you, but my son Shantanu will marry you. So we will be saying, what is the strange incident of Ganga coming and meeting Pradipa, and Pradipa saying, I don't marry you, but my son Shantanu will marry you. So this all look very strange. But in geographical, geopolitical, if you look at if you and decode it as geopolitics, what it means in first Pradipa tried to establish in Ganga, but he could not succeed. Only the second generation, that is Shantanu, could properly establish on Ganga. That is the meaning. Similarly, in Ramayana, you have a similar situation. Bhagiratha's father, Dilipa, tried a lot to bring Ganga. Bring Ganga means the poetic narrative said that Ganga is required for doing the Udaka Kriya of Sagara's sons, who were their ancestors. Those are all part of poetry. But what it means is that initially, the Dilipa generation tried to establish themselves along Ganga, but Dilipa was not successful. He died without succeeding his mission. But next generation, Bhagiratha was capable of succeeding in migrating and establishing themselves on Ganga. And because of that, Bhagiratha is considered as greatly successful, and the river is named as Bhagirathi. So there are geopolitical encoding inside the poetic narrative in the Itihas Puranic stories. So we have decoded those geopolitical information. And of course, with all that done, what is the result is we get very nicely the migration eastward. Otherwise, we will not get this eastward migration in any other manner. A very nice, very nicely and encoded, cryptically encoded eastward migration of the Ikshvakus. We are getting as part of the cross correlation of Rigveda, Ramayana, and the Mahabharata. And we quite correctly record or locate Ayodhya in the city of as a current Ayodhya in the Uttar Pradesh along the Sarayu River. There is no other scholarship, as far as I have read so many other books, there is no clear establishment that Ayodhya is indeed or Rama's Ayodhya is indeed the Ayodhya city, except the name. So name is definitely there. But whenever anybody try to identify Rama as older than 2000 BC, the archaeologists have no choice other than locating Ayodhya in some other place. And we cannot blame the archaeologists for that. But I have tried through this particular research, I was able to avoid that kind of a complicated or conflicting situation. Along with the first principles based on the real data inside the Rigveda and with some decoding of the poetic narratives, very correctly around 2000 BC, I could locate Ayodhya as correctly into the Uttar Pradesh along the Sarayu River, and all the reasons for that, and all the what happened even the previous generation. Everything is clearly sequenced and able to place as part of this particular research. So that is all about the migrations, the different kinds of migrations that is there occurred in the and this is like a summary of all the kind of migrations that occurred in the Rigveda. So you can see here, this is the yellow colored earlier, all this everything is the very ancient period, like 6th Mandala period, where they were confined into small northern Haryana, whatever they call as Varaprithvya. So that is a 6th Mandala situation here. And in the 3rd Mandala, you can see a kind of expansion to the northwest. That is where Vishwamitra crossing the via Satluj confluence using chariots driven by bulls, not horses. So that is also very important. And then 7th Mandala, the expansion. This is the empire of Sudas. By 7th Mandala, when Vasishta was the priest of Sudas, he got this much amount of territory to himself. Parushni River, there is a battle of where the India-Pakistan border, the Parushni, there the Chajna battle occurred. And after that, the battle, he even took the territories further northwest up to Asikni. That is what's shown here. And there was a battle of Yamuna. And then after the battle of Yamuna, he got a territory up to Ganga. So this is a huge thing. But we should remember the recorded boundaries of Sudas, because these recorded boundaries are recorded before these battles. So one is the Parushni River as the northwestern boundary, and Yamuna River as the eastern boundary. And the battles occurs on the borders. Battle of Yamuna occurs on the eastern border, and Battle of Parushni occurs on the western border. And Battle of Parushni is also famously named as Dasarajana battle. So that information you need to find out. So, but this map is a little ahead, a little later to the battle. So after the battle, he crossed beyond that, beyond Parushni and beyond Yamuna. But otherwise, the eastern boundary of Sudas is Yamuna, western boundary of Sudas is Parushni River. After the battles, like Battle of Yamuna, he got territories beyond Yamuna in the east. And after the Dasarajana battle or Battle of Parushni, he got territories beyond the west of Parushni. And exactly, we don't know how much he got. I mean, that's what we cannot say. Like, it will be wrong to say the Ganga as the eastern boundary or Asikni as the western boundary of Sudas, because we don't have any information how far he has conquered. So, but earlier, before the conquest, he was having rule up to Yamuna in the east and Parushni in the west. So they are the two boundaries of Suda's territory, because of which when we expelled Samvarana, he has expelled him beyond the Parushni River. So then comes this all happened in the 7th Mandala period, and then the 4th Mandala comes the expansion. So up to Sarayu and Vibali, Sarayu, Sindhu, everything started coming up, and then the 5th Mandala comes. So you can see the 5th Mandala gone to the west of Sindhu River. The migration gone to the west of Sindhu River in the 6th Mandala period. After the 5th Mandala, it is like very hectic, very haphazard, because there was migration happening in the 9th Mandala. You can see this small territory, like the Gauri River is mentioned. So that is why the 9th Mandala you have this much. And for example, in the 8th Mandala, you have so many rivers like Suvastu, that is Swat River, and then some of the tributaries, Shwetya, Anitapha, all these things are found in the 8th Mandala. And of course, 9th Mandala later to 8th Mandala. So in the 9th Mandala, you have Gauri, one of the tributary of Swat River is mentioned. And the 10th Mandala, you have an incursion into the Afghanistan, where it mentioned Ashmanwadi. Ashmanwadi River is mentioned. And they were going further into the Afghanistan through the Kupha River, which is giving an access to them to the Afghanistan. All is in the 10th Mandala. Similarly, they hear this much part, like more rivers, as I mentioned, after Shwetya, there was mentioned about Sama, Shushartu, then Urnavadi and Silimavadi. All these things are mentioned in the 10th Mandala. So you can see here. And here you can see the Manu migration. It is a pre-Ṛgvedic migration of Manu here. And then another Western Ikshvaku migration. This all happened pre-Ṛgvedic period, before Rigveda is authored, even in before the earliest part of the Rigveda. And this is whatever this you are seeing here. This is happened Eastern Ikshvaku migration during the late Ṛgvedic period. It has reached reached some small pocket. This is not pure play Ikshvakus, but Videha, the Janapada of Sita. So up to here there is recorded in the Ramayana actually. And there is, because of the Vishwamitra's attack on the Kikadas, the Kikada Magadas migrated to Bihar, and they formed the Magadha Janapada here. And similarly, there is a small migration of Chedis. The Chedis were living in an arid region where the Saraswati was drying up. They were using camels and other things. So Chedis were living in a dry region. So I associated with the dried up river channel of Saraswati, where camels must be used because it's completely dried up, desert-like condition. So from there, the Chedis migrated during the 8th or 8th Mandala period, something like that. They migrated to their Aitihasic location. This is the location where Mahabharata locates the Chedis. The Chedis were coming here. And of course, there was Matsyas. Migration is not shown, but Matsyas were there on the Yamuna River, and they slowly moved to the Rajasthan and Viratanagari, Upaplavya. The Matsya cities, everything formed somewhere in this region. And Pandavas lived in Ajnatavasa in the Matsya territory. Original location of Matsyas were along the Yamuna River, where Satyavati, Shantanu met Satyavati. Now that is where the originally Matsyas were there, and then from there they migrated southwards, and they established kingdoms in the Rajasthan. in Alwar Bharatpur region, close to Ajmer, etc. So two cities, Virat Nagari and Goplavya, is located here. And in Virat Nagari, Pandavas did their Ajnadavas, etc. And one more, Yadavas also similarly migrated from the Varaprithya region. Because older kings of Yadavas were mentioned as ruling in the Varaprithya. From there, the Trishtus or the Bharadas, dominant Bharadas, made them to migrate southwards, and they established in Mathura, which is well-known Yadava city. From Mathura, because of the attack of Jarasandha that happened during the Pandava era, they migrated to the Gujarat. And Gujarat is surprisingly the very ancient, most ancient Manu people. They were also living in Gujarat region, and from the Krishna has returned back to that ancient place where everything started. And that in that Dholavira, he established the Dwarka city. It's an island state, and surrounding the Dholavira, whatever ocean currently called Ran of Kutch, it was a shallow sea, and that shallow sea is also recorded in the Puranas as Kshira Sagara. And in the middle of the Kshira Sagara, we have Purana says in the middle of the Milky Ocean, Kshira Sagara, is Vishnu residing. And surprisingly, Dwarka, where Krishna is residing, is in the middle of the whatever geographical Kshira Sagara, the Ran of Kutch. So that is all coming into the consolidated migration. And some few more points to me. So these are some of the Dhanvas. So because many people are tempted to locate, identify the Rigveda in the Ice Age. Some say Rigveda is authored in 20,000 BC when the Ice Age was active. The entire climate mentioned in the Rigveda is completely a cold climate. No, nothing is true. Because Rigveda mentioned the Dhanvas. Dhanvas are the desert regions or wastelands. So Rigveda mentioned about wasteland, desert. And deserts are typically occurred after this somewhere in the Saraswati's dry-up period. So the late Ṛgvedic period is properly very correctly into the after the desiccation of somewhere close to the desiccation of Saraswati. So Saraswati designation is not a single day event, not a single year event. It is a process. It is a long process. So there was many centuries in which Saraswati's water flow quota reduced. The middle of the river dried up. So in the late Ṛgvedic period, somewhere in the 10th Mandala period is recording that 10th Mandala period or even 8th Mandala period. They also have actually contemporaneous with the dried up state of Saraswati. That is why the wastelands are mentioned. One of the wasteland, Dhanva, is the Thar desert. Another one is Cholistan desert. And then the marshy desert, the wasteland very close to the ocean. That is mentioned. We have seen that mentioned in the Samudra chapter of the Ṛgveda, geography of Ṛgveda, etc. So the deserts are mentioned. So this is like the people who are locating Ṛgveda in 20,000 BC before Ice Age, etc. is not seeing this data. That is why they are blindly putting this. Once you see this data, you will not go to such ancient dates. You have to correctly record it like the end of the 10th Mandala will be 1900 BC. And 1900 BC is the inflection point of the desiccation of Saraswati. The middle part of Saraswati is dried up by around 1900 BC. Vinashana, everything, another Vinashana. And the Saraswati was not flowing in the middle part. It was flowing in Haryana. After that, it reaches Pakistan up to here, and then it dried up. And there was no flow up to here. And slowly, towards the end of its course, there was one Udbheda or exit from the soil. The river started appearing, Udbheda, Chamaswadbheda. From there, the river again flow and drain into the ocean. And that ocean is nothing but this Ran of Kutch or the Purva Samudra mentioned in the Ṛgveda. And it is also mentioned Abhara Samudra, the Samudra which is on the other side. Then another Samudra is mentioned and another Samudra. So I have located it. Exact names are not mentioned in Ṛgveda, but it is my identification. 4 Samudras like this one, and this one. 3 Dhanvas like Thar desert, Cholistan desert, and the marshy desert to the north of the Ran of Kutch. So these are all. So I have mentioned here one of the reasons why Ṛgveda cannot be dated to far-fetched late like 12,000 BC or 20,000 BC. All these Dhanvas or the arid dried up region connect Ṛgveda to the dried up river of Saraswati of 1900 BC. So that is one important point for those people who are dating Ṛgveda in 20,000 BC, etc. And now the last what we have is, I have mentioned about so many rivers, 32 rivers, etc. But there are few place names mentioned in the Ṛgveda. And I mentioned why the cities, etc. are not mentioned separately. The cities normally assume the name of the river itself. So just like, for example, Kubha river is now known as Kabul river. The city which is formed on the Kubha river is also known as Kabul city. So that kind of conventions are followed, because of which city names are not coming out as separate from the river names. But even then there are exceptions. So some of the settlements are named like Manusha, which is the Manusha Tirtha and Manas near Kaital Kurukshetra, which is associated with the earliest Manu. And Manu's daughter Ilaspada is mentioned again near Kaital in Kurukshetra. Both the places are in Kurukshetra, close to the Apaya river. So, and then the third one is not directly mentioned, but is implied, where with using the terminology called Trisha Hasta. That is three places, like that it is mentioned. There is a word called Trisha Hasta mentioned in Ṛgveda. There are three sacred places in Varaprithvya. Two are named, but third one is not named. But three is mentioned. That means there are three places. And only Ṛgveda explicitly mentioned only two of them. And the third one is the Bharati Tirtha choir in Kurukshetra, again in Kurukshetra, Bharati Tirtha. And it is the sacred place of the Bharatas, because their patron goddess Bharati is consecrated or in this particular Tirtha. And it is known as choir in Kurukshetra. And Bharati is current transformation of Bharati is the Bharat Mata. So many people think that Bharat Mata is a new innovation by freedom fighters. But there was a goddess named Bharati in Ṛgveda, who was the patron goddess, Kula Devata of the Bharatas. And her sacred place was the Bharati Tirtha, which is implicitly mentioned inside the Ṛgveda, earliest mandala of the Ṛgveda, along with the Manusha and Ilaspada. Third one is not named. So later on it became known as Bharati Tirtha, because that is where the goddess resides. The Kula Devata of Bharatas reside in Kurukshetra. And Manusha and Ilaspada are sacred for not only for Bharatas, but for all the Panchajanas, because Manu and Ila are ancestors for all the Panchajanas, not only for Bharatas or their ancestors Purus, but it is sacred for Yadavas, Anavas, Drishus, and Turvasas, all the 5 tribes sacred. And Bharati Tirtha is sacred only for the Bharatas. And then there are 2 mountains, Arjiga and Sushoma. These are the mountains from which the rivers Arjigiya and Sushoma originate. So these 2 river names actually are mountain names. So mountain Arjiga, mountain Sushoma. The river originated from Arjiga is Arjigiya, the Sil river. And the river originating from Sushoma mountain is the Sushoma, the Sohan river. Both of them are in Pakistan. It is a Soma growing region. These 2 river banks are famous for the Soma. And then Pastyavati is there. That is currently known as Takshashila. And it is Takshila, Pakistan. And Sharyanavati is a lake. There is Sharyanavati region. That is a large region. Within that, there is a lake called Sharyanavati. And that is now currently known as Kanpur Lake. And it's located on the Haro River, Sarayu River. And this is also one reason why the river is known as Sarayu. That is originating from the Sara. And that Sara is Saryanavati. That lake is Saryanavati. Again, this Saryanavati lake also is famous for its Soma. So this is, you can say, the place names mentioned in the Ṛgveda.